The mining station, Kepler 442b, hung in the void like a forgotten piece of scrap metal, its dull gray hull reflecting the distant orange glow of its parent star. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, watching the automated cargo haulers drift between the asteroid fields. 3 years she had been stationed here. 3 years of supervising mineral extraction operations that barely registered on the Galactic Trade Union's profit margins. "Another exciting day in paradise," muttered her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, as he approached with 2 steaming cups of synthetic coffee. The bitter liquid had become their morning ritual, a small comfort in the endless routine of deep space mining operations. Sarah accepted the cup gratefully. At least it's quiet. No pirates, no alien incursions, no diplomatic crises. Sometimes boring is exactly what we need. The irony of her words would haunt her later. Webb nodded toward the main display showing the day's extraction reports. "Productivity is up 12% this quarter. The new plasma drills are working better than expected. Maybe Command will finally approve our request for shore leave rotations." Before Sarah could respond, the communications array crackled to life. Ensign Rodriguez's voice echoed through the observation deck with unusual urgency. "Commander Chen to the bridge immediately. We have an unscheduled arrival." Sarah and Webb exchanged glances. Unscheduled arrivals were rare in this remote sector. Supply runs came every 6 weeks like clockwork, and the nearest inhabited system was 3 jumps away. They made their way quickly to the bridge, their boots echoing in the narrow corridors of the utilitarian station. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity. Rodriguez stood at the sensor station, her face pale with concentration. "Commander, we detected a hyperspace signature approximately 10 minutes ago. Large displacement, definitely capital ship class." "Pirates?" Webb asked, though they all knew this sector was too remote and unprofitable for most criminal organizations. "Unknown," Rodriguez replied. "The signature doesn't match any ship in our databases. It's different. The energy pattern is unlike anything I've seen." Sarah studied the sensor readings on the main display. The approaching vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of their mining station. Its configuration was angular and aggressive, bristling with what appeared to be weapon systems. But most unsettling was its complete lack of response to their hails. "Any communication attempts?" Sarah asked. "Broadcasting on all standard frequencies, including the Universal First Contact protocols. Complete silence." As if summoned by their conversation, the unknown vessel emerged from hyperspace in a flash of distorted light. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The ship was beautiful and terrible, its hull a deep purple-black material that seemed to absorb light. Geometric patterns covered its surface, pulsing with an eerie blue glow that suggested advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. "My God," Webb whispered. "What is that thing?" Before anyone could respond, the alien vessel moved with impossible grace, positioning itself between the mining station and the nearby asteroid field. Its intent was clear without words. They were trapped. "Red alert," Sarah commanded, though she knew their mining station's defensive capabilities were laughable against such a vessel. "Get me a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha transmission." "Commander!" Rodriguez called out, her voice tight with fear. "I'm detecting massive energy buildup across multiple points on their hull. They're charging weapons." The alien ship hung motionless for what felt like an eternity, its blue patterns pulsing in hypnotic rhythms. Then, without warning or communication, it opened fire. The first blast struck the station's primary power core, sending shockwaves through the entire structure. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid failed. Sarah was thrown against her command chair as the station shuddered under the impact. "Damage report!" she shouted over the blaring alarms. "Primary power offline, backup systems engaged," Webb called out from the engineering station. "Hull breaches on deck 7 and 8. We're venting atmosphere." The second blast targeted the communications array, leaving them completely cut off from the outside universe. Sarah realized with growing horror that this wasn't a random attack or piracy attempt. The aliens were methodically disabling their ability to call for help or escape. "Evacuation pods?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The docking bay took a direct hit," Webb reported grimly. "All escape pods are either destroyed or inaccessible." As if responding to their conversation, the alien vessel moved closer, its weapons still glowing with deadly energy. Through the viewport, Sarah could see smaller craft emerging from its hull, sleek, organic-looking ships that moved with predatory grace toward the mining station. "Boarding craft," Rodriguez announced unnecessarily. Everyone could see them approaching. Sarah's mind raced through their options. The mining station had a crew of 47 humans, mostly engineers and technicians with minimal combat training. They had some small arms in the security locker, but nothing that could realistically stand against advanced alien technology. "Webb, get everyone to the lower levels. Seal the blast doors and prepare for boarding. Rodriguez, download everything from the main computer to portable storage. If we don't make it, at least there might be a record of what happened here." As the first alien boarding craft attached itself to their hull with an ominous metallic clang, Sarah allowed herself one moment of regret. She thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green forests she would never see again, about the family she had left behind to serve on this remote outpost. Then the sounds of cutting tools echoed through the station walls, and she pushed such thoughts aside. Whatever these aliens wanted, whatever they were capable of, she would not make it easy for them. The first breach came at Deck 5, near the main engineering section. Sarah and her security team of 6 volunteers took position behind improvised barricades made from mining equipment and storage containers. They waited in tense silence, their improvised weapons feeling pathetically inadequate. When the aliens finally appeared, Sarah's first thought was how utterly alien they truly were. Tall and angular, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed too large for their bodies, they moved with an unsettling fluid grace. Their skin appeared to be a dark gray material that might have been organic or technological. The distinction was impossible to make. Most disturbing were their eyes, large black orbs that seemed to absorb light and reflect nothing back. They wore no visible armor but carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. As they advanced through the breach they had cut in the hull, their movements were perfectly coordinated, almost like a dance of death. "Wait for my signal," Sarah whispered into her comm unit, though she wondered if their improvised defense would last even minutes against such obviously advanced beings. The lead alien paused at the edge of their barricade, its large head tilting as if studying them with curious detachment. When it spoke, the words came not through any visible mouth, but seemed to resonate directly in their minds. "Primitive creatures, your resistance is unnecessary. Submit and your termination will be swift." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing life support systems. The casual dismissal in those words, the complete lack of consideration for human life, told her everything she needed to know about their captor's intentions. "Like hell," she muttered, and opened fire. The plasma rifle's energy bolt struck the alien center mass, and for a moment, Sarah felt a surge of hope as the creature staggered, but her triumph turned to despair as she realized the being was merely surprised, not injured. The energy that should have been lethal had barely marked its strange skin. The alien's response was swift and terrible. Its weapon discharged with a sound like reality tearing, and the engineer crouched next to Sarah simply ceased to exist. Not vaporized or burned, but gone as if he had never been there at all. "Fall back!" Sarah screamed, but she knew it was already too late. The aliens moved through their defensive positions like death itself, their weapons erasing her people with clinical efficiency. In less than 3 minutes, Sarah found herself alone, pressed against the far wall of the engineering section, with nowhere left to run. The lead alien approached her slowly, its black eyes reflecting her terrified face. When it spoke again, its mental voice carried what might have been amusement. Your species shows courage in the face of certain death. This is noted. However, courage without capability is merely foolishness. What do you want? Sarah gasped, though she suspected the answer would offer no comfort. This system contains resources we require. Your presence is an inconvenience to be eliminated. Your species is primitive, weak, and poses no threat to our operations. We will harvest what we need and depart. The alien raised its weapon toward her, but before it could fire, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not the general alert klaxons they had been hearing, but something different, a deep, resonant tone that Sarah had never heard before. The alien paused, its head tilting toward some unseen communication device. After a moment, it lowered its weapon slightly. It appears another ship approaches this location. No matter. We will deal with this interruption as we have dealt with you. Through the damaged viewport, Sarah could see a new hyperspace signature forming. Hope flickered in her chest as she recognized the displacement pattern. Human technology, definitely military class. But her hope died quickly as she considered what one human ship could possibly do against the aliens' overwhelming technological superiority. Whoever was coming to their rescue was flying straight into a death trap. The ship that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything the aliens had encountered before. At first glance, it appeared to be another primitive human vessel, boxy, utilitarian, and significantly smaller than their own capital ship. The aliens aboard their command vessel observed it with the same detached curiosity they might show toward an insect. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, studying the tactical display with growing concern. The mining station's distress beacon had cut out abruptly 3 hours ago, and what he saw now confirmed his worst fears. The station was dark, its hull breached in multiple locations, and the massive alien vessel hovering nearby left no doubt about what had happened. "Jesus Christ," whispered his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. "Look at the size of that thing. Our whole ship could fit in one of its weapon ports." Morrison nodded grimly. The Defiant was a Reaper-class stealth frigate, designed for reconnaissance and surgical strikes rather than frontal assault. Against the alien dreadnought, it was David facing Goliath, except David's sling looked more like a pebble. "Any survivors aboard the station?" Morrison asked. Foster bent over her console, fine-tuning the sensor array. "I'm detecting faint life signs. Maybe a dozen people still alive, scattered throughout the lower levels. But, Captain, if we try to dock for rescue operations, that alien ship will vaporize us before we can launch a single pod." The communications officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're being hailed by the alien vessel." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English with an accent that sounded almost European. "Human vessel, you have entered a restricted zone. Depart immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." Morrison exchanged glances with his senior staff. The translation was flawless, which meant these aliens had been studying humanity for some time. That knowledge could be an advantage or a death sentence, depending on how they used it. "Unknown vessel," Morrison responded. "You are in violation of human colonial authority space. Withdraw immediately and release any survivors from the mining station." The alien's response came as a sound that might have been laughter. "Your primitive weapons pose no threat to us. We have observed your species' military capabilities. You fire crude projectiles and low-energy plasma bolts that cannot penetrate our hull material. Your ship will be eliminated as easily as the mining station." Morrison cut the channel and turned to his crew. "Well, they're not wrong about our conventional weapons. Foster, what do we have in the special storage bay?" Foster's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Sir, the prototype is untested. The simulation runs were inconclusive." "Inconclusive is better than definitely dead," Morrison replied. "Get it prepped for deployment. And Foster, make sure our friends out there think we're running away scared." The next few minutes were a carefully choreographed performance. The Defiant powered down its weapons and began a slow retreat from the alien vessel, broadcasting increasingly desperate pleas for negotiation. To the aliens monitoring them, it appeared to be exactly what they expected. Another primitive human ship recognizing its inferiority and attempting to flee. But in the Defiant's lower cargo bay, Chief Engineer Rodriguez was activating systems that didn't officially exist. The device was roughly the size of a shipping container, its surface covered with cooling vents and warning labels in 12 different languages. The only marking that mattered was the simple designation stenciled on its side: Project Prometheus, Theoretical Physics Division. "Reactor signature is stable," Rodriguez reported over the comm. "Containment field is holding at optimal parameters. But Captain, if this thing malfunctions, then we'll have front-row seats to the birth of a new star," Morrison finished. "How long until it's ready?" "Give me 10 more minutes." Meanwhile, the alien commander was growing impatient with the human ship's obvious fear. They had hoped for at least token resistance to make the destruction more interesting, but these humans were proving even more cowardly than their initial assessment had suggested. "Bring us closer," the commander ordered. "Let us finish this quickly. The mining operation must resume within the cycle." The alien dreadnought moved forward with predatory grace, its weapons beginning to charge for the killing blow. From their perspective, the human ship was clearly trying to reach minimum jump distance to escape into hyperspace. It was a futile effort, but watching primitive species struggle against inevitable death had always provided mild entertainment. They never noticed the small object that separated from the human ship's belly during its apparent retreat. The device was no larger than a fighter craft, and its stealth coating made it nearly invisible to their sensors. It drifted silently through space, carried by momentum toward the alien vessel like a piece of space debris. "Prometheus deployment successful," Rodriguez reported. "Telemetry is good. Initiating approach sequence." Morrison watched the tactical display as their secret weapon closed the distance to the alien ship. The Prometheus device was humanity's most closely guarded secret, developed in hidden laboratories using theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of known science. Only a handful of people in the entire human colonial authority knew it existed, and fewer still understood how it worked. The principle was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Rather than trying to penetrate the alien hull with conventional weapons, the Prometheus device would create a localized space-time distortion directly inside the target vessel. For a brief moment, the laws of physics would become negotiable. "Device is now 300 meters from target," Rodriguez announced. "All systems show green. Initiating final sequence on your command, Captain." Morrison took a deep breath. What they were about to do would either save the mining station survivors or doom them all. There was no middle ground. "Execute." The Prometheus device activated with a flash of exotic energy that briefly lit up space around the alien dreadnought. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The massive alien ship continued its approach, weapons fully charged and locked onto the retreating human vessel. Then reality hiccuped. The effect started small, a slight shimmer in the space directly in front of the alien ship's command section, but it grew rapidly, spreading like cracks in glass across the fabric of space-time itself. Inside the expanding distortion field, the normal rules that governed matter and energy began to break down. The alien commander's first indication that something was wrong came when the deck beneath its feet began to ripple like water. Emergency alerts flooded the bridge as their inertial dampeners failed to compensate for gravitational forces, that were simultaneously pointing in 6 different directions. "Report!" the commander demanded, though the words seemed to echo strangely in the distorted space. "Unknown spatial anomaly directly ahead," reported the sensor operator, its voice taking on a hollow quality. "Our hull integrity is... The readings make no sense." Through the viewports, the aliens could see stars bending into impossible spirals. The mining station, which had been directly behind the human ship moments before, now appeared to exist in 3 separate locations simultaneously. And their own vessel was beginning to fold in on itself like an origami creation made from reality. The alien commander realized with growing horror that the humans had not been retreating at all. They had been deploying a weapon beyond anything in the aliens' extensive database of primitive species capabilities. The realization came far too late. Inside the Prometheus distortion field, sections of the alien dreadnought began to exist in multiple temporal states at once. Parts of the ship were experiencing time at different rates, creating impossible stresses on the hull. The advanced alien materials that had shrugged off conventional weapons proved helpless against physics itself going insane. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 14, came the frantic report. "No, wait! Sections 7 through 14 no longer exist. They're... Captain, I don't have words for what they are." The alien commander's tactical training, developed over centuries of conquest, had no protocols for dealing with an enemy that could weaponize the fundamental structure of reality. As the distortion field spread throughout their ship, systems that had functioned perfectly for millennia began to fail in ways that violated every known law of science. "Weapons status?" the commander asked, though it already knew the answer. "All primary batteries are offline. The targeting systems cannot lock onto targets that exist in normal space-time while we are wherever we are now." Morrison watched from the Defiance bridge as the alien dreadnought began to tear itself apart from the inside. The Prometheus device was working exactly as the theoretical physicists had predicted, and far more dramatically than anyone had dared hope. "My God," Foster breathed. "We actually did it. We actually brought down something that size." But Morrison's expression remained grim. "Rodriguez, how long until the field collapses?" "Approximately 4 minutes, Captain. Then space-time will snap back to normal configuration. And anything still inside the field when that happens will cease to exist in any meaningful sense of the word." Morrison nodded and opened a channel to the dying alien ship. "Alien vessel, this is Captain Morrison. You have 3 minutes to evacuate your ship before the distortion field collapses. Any crew members who surrender will be treated according to Human Colonial Authority protocols for prisoners of war." The response came immediately, the alien commander's mental voice filled with something Morrison had never expected to hear from such an advanced species. Fear. "What manner of weapon is this? How do you primitives command such forces?" "The same way your people command whatever technology you use to destroy our mining station," Morrison replied. "We learned. We adapted. We survived. The question now is whether you'll do the same." The evacuation pods that launched from the dying alien dreadnought were unlike anything in human records. They moved with organic grace through space, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like living metal. Morrison counted 12 pods in total, each carrying what his sensor suggested were between 8 and 12 alien life forms. "Captain," Foster reported, "the lead pod is requesting permission to come aboard. They're broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies." Morrison considered the request carefully. Taking alien prisoners was one thing. Allowing potentially dangerous beings onto his ship was quite another. But the rules of war were clear, even when dealing with species that had shown no such consideration for human life. "Grant permission for one pod only. Full security protocols. And Foster, if any of them so much as breathe wrong, we jettison them into space." As the alien pod attached itself to the Defiant's docking bay, Morrison made his way to the cargo hold that had been hastily converted into a holding area. 6 of his best security personnel waited with weapons drawn, their faces masks of professional calm that barely concealed their underlying tension. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and the alien commander stepped through. Up close, the being was even more unsettling than the sensor readings had suggested. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its elongated limbs giving it a spider-like quality that triggered primitive fears in the watching humans. Its skin was indeed the dark gray material Morrison had observed earlier, but now he could see it wasn't skin at all. It was some form of biomechanical interface, technology and biology seamlessly merged. The creature's large black eyes fixed on Morrison with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. When it spoke, the words formed directly in his mind with disturbing clarity. "I am Hierarchic Prime Zekthon of the Vorthak Collective. You have demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence assessments deemed impossible for your species. We require explanation." Morrison stepped forward, maintaining eye contact despite every instinct screaming at him to look away. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Colonial Authority. Your forces attacked a civilian mining station without provocation. Under the laws of war, you are now prisoners until formal hostilities cease." The alien's head tilted in what might have been confusion or amusement. "Laws of war?" "Your species has existed in space for less than 2 centuries. You have encountered only 3 other intelligent species, all of whom you have either avoided or driven to extinction through your primitive aggression. What possible authority do you claim over us?" "The same authority you claimed when you opened fire on unarmed miners," Morrison replied evenly. "The right of survival." For the first time since boarding the human ship, Zekthon showed something like respect in its mental voice. "An honest answer. Your species' reputation for barbarism appears to have been understated." It paused, those black eyes studying Morrison intently. "Tell me, primitive, how did you create the spatial distortion that destroyed my vessel?" Morrison smiled coldly. "The same way you learned to travel between stars, I imagine. We studied. We experimented. We built things that probably shouldn't exist." He gestured toward the viewport, where the wreckage of the alien dreadnought was slowly tumbling through space. "As you just discovered." The alien commander was quiet for a long moment, processing information through whatever quantum consciousness it possessed. When it finally spoke again, its mental voice carried a new quality, something that might have been calculation. "The Vorthak Collective has encountered 847 intelligent species during our expansion across this galaxy arm. Of these, 701 were eliminated as being incompatible with our resource requirements. 134 were subjugated and incorporated into our labor forces. 12 were deemed advanced enough to warrant peaceful coexistence treaties." Morrison felt a chill as he realized where this was heading. "And which category are you planning to put humanity in?" "Until today, Category 1. Your species showed all the standard signs of a primitive civilization: linear technology development, chemical propulsion, simple energy weapons, basic artificial intelligence. Even your most advanced ships use technologies we mastered millennia ago." "But," Morrison prompted, "but no primitive species has ever deployed a weapon that manipulates space-time itself. Such technology requires understanding of physics that we ourselves have only recently begun to explore. This suggests either remarkable hidden advancement or—" Zekthon paused, its head tilting further. "Or assistance from a species we have not yet encountered." Morrison kept his expression neutral. "What makes you think we couldn't have developed it ourselves?" "Because the mathematics involved require quantum consciousness interfaces that your neural architecture cannot support. Your biological brains, however enhanced, lack the processing capacity for the calculations needed to safely deploy such weapons. The alien was fishing for information, Morrison realized. Good. Let it think humanity had allies among the stars. The truth, that the Prometheus device had been developed through a combination of brilliant theoretical work, desperate improvisation, and sheer luck, would remain classified at the highest levels. Maybe we're just smarter than you gave us credit for, Morrison said. Before Zekthon could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Foster's voice echoed over the comm system with barely controlled urgency. "Captain, to the bridge immediately! We have multiple hyperspace signatures incoming. Big ones!" Morrison looked at the alien commander. "Friends of yours?" "The collective does not abandon its operatives," Zekthon replied, though Morrison detected something like uncertainty in its mental voice. "However, the loss of a hierarchic vessel will have attracted attention from higher authorities." Morrison left the alien under guard and rushed to the bridge. What he saw on the tactical display made his blood run cold. 7 massive signatures were emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, each one larger than the dreadnought they had just destroyed. These weren't exploration vessels or even military ships. They were city-sized monstrosities that could only be described as world killers. "My God," Foster whispered. "Those things could crack planets." "Communication from the lead vessel," the comm officer reported. "Audio and visual. Put it on screen." The being that appeared on the main viewer made Zekthon look almost human by comparison. It was clearly of the same species, but far more heavily modified with biomechanical enhancements. Where Zekthon's interface was sleek and integrated, this creature's modifications were massive and obviously powerful. Cables and conduits ran directly into its skull, and its eyes glowed with an inner light that suggested direct neural interface with its ship's systems. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass their communications equipment entirely and resonate inside the bridge itself. "I am Fleet Commander Vorthak of the Vorthak Expansion Force. You will immediately surrender the primitive vessel responsible for destroying hierarchic Prime Zekthon's command ship. Compliance will result in swift termination. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of this system and a punitive expedition to your home world." Morrison stood slowly from his command chair, acutely aware that his next words would determine not just the fate of his crew and the mining station survivors, but possibly the future of the human species. "Fleet Commander, this is Captain Morrison. Your subordinate attacked a civilian target in human colonial authority space. We defended ourselves according to the rules of war. Hierarchic Prime Zekthon is alive and unharmed aboard my ship. I'm prepared to discuss prisoner exchange under proper diplomatic protocols." The alien's glowing eyes seemed to focus directly on Morrison, despite the impossibility of such precision over an open comm channel. "Primitive, you speak of diplomacy while wielding weapons beyond your comprehension. Our scans of your vessel indicate technology signatures that should not exist in this region of space. You will explain the source of these capabilities." Morrison exchanged glances with Foster. They were walking a tightrope now, trying to project strength while avoiding a confrontation they couldn't possibly win. 7 dreadnoughts against 1 frigate wasn't a battle. It was target practice. "The source of our capabilities is irrelevant," Morrison replied. "What matters is that they exist. Your forces attacked first. We responded with proportional force. The question now is whether you want to escalate this into something that serves no one's interests." Vorthak was quiet for a moment, its enhanced consciousness presumably processing data at superhuman speeds. When it spoke again, the quality of its mental voice had changed subtly. "Primitive, you have presented us with a puzzle. Your species shows classic signs of early technological development, yet you deploy weapons that rival our own most advanced systems. This contradiction requires explanation." The alien's image leaned closer to the screen. Know this: if you are fronting for a more advanced species, if you are merely tools being used by forces we have not yet identified, then your usefulness ends the moment we identify your masters. We have eliminated client species before. Morrison felt the weight of that threat, but he also sensed something else in the alien's words. Uncertainty. Fear, even. The Vorthak had built their expansion on overwhelming technological superiority, and the sudden appearance of humans wielding space-time weapons had shaken their fundamental assumptions about this region of the galaxy. "We have no masters," Morrison said quietly. "We learned, we adapted, we built something new, and if you continue threatening civilian populations, you'll discover what else we've learned to build." The standoff stretched across the void of space, two species facing each other across an impossible gulf of understanding. Neither side could afford to back down, but neither side could risk the consequences of total war. The standoff lasted 18 hours. During that time, both fleets maintained their positions while furious diplomatic communications flowed between ships. Morrison found himself in the unprecedented position of conducting first contact negotiations with a species that had just attempted genocide against his people. Hierarchic Prime Zekthon had been surprisingly cooperative during its detention. The alien leader seemed genuinely curious about human capabilities and had engaged in several lengthy conversations with Morrison about their respective species' histories. What emerged was a picture of the Vorthak collective that was both impressive and terrifying. "Your species has existed for approximately 12,000 Earth years," Morrison said during one of their sessions. "In that time, you've conquered most of this galaxy arm and absorbed the technology of nearly 1,000 other species. That's quite an achievement." Zekthon's mental voice carried what might have been pride. "The collective represents the apex of evolutionary development. We have transcended the limitations of pure biological existence through integration with our technology. Each conquered species adds their unique capabilities to our collective knowledge." "And the species that refused to join you?" "Were eliminated as threats to galactic stability." The alien's response was matter of fact, without any trace of remorse. "Primitive species often make choices that are detrimental to their own survival. The collective offers efficiency, purpose, and technological advancement beyond anything they could achieve independently." Morrison studied the alien carefully. "But you're not here to offer us membership, are you? You came to eliminate us as a potential threat." "Correct. Your species' psychological profiles indicated high levels of aggression, individualism, and resistance to authority. These traits make successful integration unlikely. Elimination was deemed the most efficient solution." "Was," Morrison noted, "past tense." Zekthon's head tilted in that characteristic gesture. "Your demonstration of advanced weaponry has forced a re-evaluation of that assessment. The collective does not waste useful resources. If humanity possesses technology that could benefit our expansion, integration may be reconsidered." Before Morrison could respond, Foster's voice echoed through the detention area. "Captain, you need to get to the bridge immediately. We have incoming hyperspace signatures, human signatures." Morrison's heart leaped. Reinforcements. He left Zekthon under guard and rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed a sight that filled him with both hope and dread. 3 human Colonial Authority dreadnoughts were emerging from hyperspace in combat formation, their hulls bristling with weapons and their sensor arrays scanning the alien fleet. The lead ship was the HCA Indomitable, flagship of Admiral Sarah Martinez. Morrison had served under Martinez years earlier and knew her reputation for aggressive tactics and unwillingness to back down from any fight. "Defiant, this is Admiral Martinez. Report your status immediately." Morrison activated the comm channel. Admiral, this is Captain Morrison. We have successfully repelled an alien attack on mining station Kepler 442b and are currently in a diplomatic standoff with an alien fleet. I have their commander aboard as a prisoner of war. Understood, Captain. We received your emergency transmission before communications were cut. What's the tactical situation? Morrison glanced at the display showing the alien fleet. 7 enemy dreadnoughts, each approximately 3 times larger than our vessels. Advanced technology including energy weapons that can disintegrate matter at the molecular level. However, they appear vulnerable to spatial distortion weapons. There was a pause before Martinez responded. Captain, did you just say you successfully engaged 7 enemy dreadnoughts with a single frigate? Affirmative, Admiral. We deployed the Prometheus prototype with successful results. Another pause, longer this time. Morrison could imagine the conversations happening on the Admiral's bridge as she absorbed the implications of what he had just told her. Copy that, Defiant. Maintain current position. We're moving to support formation. As the human fleet repositioned itself, Fleet Commander Vorthak's image appeared on both fleets' communications channels simultaneously. Additional primitive vessels have arrived. This changes nothing. You are still vastly outmatched in both numbers and technology. Surrender now and your termination will be swift. Admiral Martinez's response came over the open channel, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding warships in hostile space. Unknown aliens. This is Admiral Martinez of the Human Colonial Authority. You have attacked our civilians without provocation and are currently threatening vessels in sovereign human space. You have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. If you choose to engage, you will discover that humanity has more surprises than you might expect. Morrison watched the tactical display as both fleets maneuvered for position. The mathematics were still overwhelming. 7 alien dreadnoughts against 4 human vessels. But the aliens didn't know how many Prometheus devices the human fleet carried or what other theoretical weapons might have been developed in the secret laboratories of Earth. The bluff might actually work. Vorthak's response revealed the first crack in alien confidence. You speak boldly for primitives who have only recently achieved interstellar travel. Our analysis suggests your species lacks the industrial capacity to produce spatial distortion weapons in significant quantities. You may have destroyed one vessel through luck or technological theft, but you cannot stand against the full might of the collective. Admiral Martinez smiled coldly on the comm channel. Would you like to test that theory, Fleet Commander? What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet began a complex maneuver that appeared to be a defensive formation, but was actually designed to position each ship for optimal deployment of theoretical weapons. The aliens, interpreting this as a sign of weakness, began their own advance. The first Prometheus device deployed from the Indomitable created a localized space-time distortion directly between the two fleets. But instead of targeting an enemy ship, it created a barrier of twisted space that made targeting impossible for both sides. The second device, launched from the HCA Retribution, did something even more unexpected. It created a spatial fold that briefly connected normal space with hyperspace, allowing the human ships to effectively teleport behind the alien formation. The third device was the Master Stroke. Instead of attacking the alien ships directly, it created a series of micro-distortions that interfered with the aliens' quantum consciousness interfaces. For several crucial minutes, the Vorthak fleet found themselves unable to coordinate their actions or even communicate with each other effectively. In the chaos that followed, the human fleet demonstrated a level of tactical innovation that left the aliens reeling. Ships that should have been primitive and predictable began executing maneuvers that violated the collective's understanding of human military doctrine. Weapons that should have been crude and ineffective began targeting alien systems with surgical precision. But it was Morrison's final gambit that ended the engagement. On his orders, the Defiant released Hierarchic Prime Zekthon in an escape pod that was immediately captured by the alien fleet. Along with the alien commander, the pod carried detailed technical specifications for humanity's theoretical weapons research, including several designs that existed only in computer simulations. The effect on the Vorthak fleet was immediate and dramatic. Faced with evidence of human weapons that could manipulate time, gravity, and quantum consciousness itself, Fleet Commander Vorthak made the first retreat in collective military history. "This engagement is concluded," Vorthak announced over the open channel. "The Vorthak Collective acknowledges that humanity possesses capabilities that warrant further study. We withdraw to reassess our position." As the alien fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Morrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had won, not through superior firepower or numbers, but through the most human trait of all, the ability to bluff convincingly while adapting rapidly to impossible circumstances. Admiral Martinez's voice brought him back to the present. "Captain Morrison, I want a full report on everything that happened here. And I mean everything, including exactly how you convinced a species that's conquered half the galaxy to run away from 4 human ships." Morrison smiled as he began composing his report. The truth was that humanity had won its first interstellar war not through advanced technology or superior strategy, but through the oldest human survival skill of all, making enemies believe you were far more dangerous than you actually were. The mining station survivors were rescued within 6 hours. The Prometheus devices were recovered and analyzed, and somewhere in the depths of space, the Vorthak Collective began the long process of re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about the species called humanity. It would not be their last mistake. 3 months later, Morrison stood on the observation deck of Starbase Alpha, watching supply ships ferry materials for the new defensive installations being constructed throughout human space. The encounter at Kepler 442b had changed everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy, and they now knew they had neighbors who viewed them as either resources to be harvested or threats to be eliminated. But they had also proven something equally important. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humans didn't break. They adapted, they innovated, and they survived. The Vorthak Collective had expected to find primitive warriors wielding crude weapons. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that could make impossible things possible when survival was at stake. The stars no longer looked empty to Morrison. They were full of possibilities, threats, and opportunities that humanity was only beginning to understand. But whatever came next, he was confident his species would face it the same way they had faced everything else in their history. With determination, ingenuity, and the absolute refusal to go quietly into the dark.